Sorry, phone call came in, interrupted the video, part 3. SNRIs are better for atypical depression. All right, here's where it gets weird, but stick with me. Typical depression is better treated by SRIs. Typical depression is the inability to sleep and undereating. Atypical depression is oversleeping, overeating. That is better treated typically by an SNRI or Wellbutrin, which is basically like a norepinephrine and dopamine reuptake inhibitor. The challenge is, even though we call typical depression characterized by undersleeping and undereating typical, it is less common than atypical depression, oversleeping, overeating, which is more common. I didn't come up with the terms, I'm just the messenger. But then that also says that Wellbutrin is also a reuptake inhibitor, but it works specifically on norepinephrine and dopamine. Wellbutrin's really interesting because it does have some weight loss properties associated with it. In fact, some weight loss medications have Wellbutrin built into it. It also has some efficacy with smoking cessation because it works on that dopamine receptor. It can block the positive effects of smoking and can help people quit smoking, which is kind of cool. And Wellbutrin can help with ADHD because ADHD is also part of the dopamine system. So Wellbutrin is a very interesting medication for all those things. Challenge with like Wellbutrin or Chantix, Chantix is basically the Vivitrol for quitting smoking, right? It's putting a key in a lock, but rather than turning it so that you get a positive effect of dopamine, Chantix puts a key into the dopamine lock, breaks off the key, and then when you try to smoke for that first week, you don't get any dopamine from smoking, and then people quit smoking after the first week, continue to take the Chantix, break the habit of smoking, quit the Chantix. So the challenge with anything like Wellbutrin or Chantix, anything that you do that like messes with the dopamine system that way, often leads to very vivid dreams that can be disturbing to some people. So, lastly, let's talk about benzodiazepines here. Not lastly, I'm going to talk for a while, but benzos are anti-anxiety medications that have basically something like 5 effects. I don't know if I can remember all of them, but like they're hypnotic in that they make you sleepy. They're anxiolytic, which means like they help you relax. They're anticonvulsive, like because they make your muscles relax. They have some anti-seizure properties. They are hypnotic, anxiolytic. They're central nervous system depressants. So benzos are, benzos and alcohol both work on GABA. Benzos are usually faster acting, specifically like your Xanax and Ativan. Your Klonopin is a little bit longer acting. Benzos are great if someone's having an acute panic attack. Then take a benzo. It will calm you down immediately. Antidepressants, which are also used as anti-anxiety medications like Prozac and Zoloft, are better for chronic anxiety. So if you have chronic anxiety, you don't want to give someone benzos because you can get addicted to benzos. And the challenge is because benzos have muscle relaxant properties, people can get used to taking them, build a tolerance, and then what happens is if they stop taking them immediately, you can go into withdrawal and you can die from the withdrawal of benzos and alcohol. You typically will not die. There's not a risk of dying really of opioid withdrawal. You will not die directly from the withdrawal of it. You might die from the complications of it if you're particularly unhealthy. But like that's why legally in jails, if you're opiate dependent, they can just be like, too bad, we're not giving you anything, just suffer through it. Cruel, but not illegal because you wouldn't perhaps die from the consequences of it. But in jail, they have medical beer because sometimes, you can die from the withdrawal of alcohol or benzos. So important to note for people who are physically dependent there, you can't just have them stop. Benzos have abuse potential because they work to shut down, they slow the thinking of the prefrontal cortex, which is great if you're overthinking and worrying in a panic attack, but not so great, if you're at a bar and you have a couple drinks and you become less inhibited. because it kind of shuts down that filter that is the prefrontal cortex. But then you have too many drinks and you decide, oh, it's a good idea to drive home, right? So benzos and opiates, probably the most common way people die. Again, double downers, quickest way to kill yourself. So you want to make sure you're screening for that, because they are central nervous system depressants. They slow breathing, they slow heart rate. That helps you relax. Again, basically the therapeutic effect of anything, you see the opposite of it in its withdrawal, right? So if benzos help your muscles relax, the withdrawal is going to be, muscle tightening and a seizure risk. If benzos slow your heart rate, you're going to have a hyper heart rate in withdrawal, right? So what goes up must come down. Antipsychotics. There's a book here called Mad in America. If you ever really want to be upset with the entire everything system, read Mad in America. The first generation of antipsychotics were Thorazine and Haldol. They have sedative effects. They cause people to gain a lot of weight. They perhaps had some efficacy in treating psychotic symptoms. Some people refer to them as liquid handcuffs because it helped people calm down who were agitated. But there was a lot of racism that existed there. There was a lot of misdiagnosing. The second generation were supposedly better, but I don't know if I believe that evidence either. Risperidones, Zyprexa, even Abilify. We then advertised Abilify as like, if your first line antidepressant isn't working, take Abilify and it'll be even better. And I'm like, oh, probably try like some talk therapy or something. But challenge with second generation antipsychotics, they're not perhaps as sedative or weight gaining, but they still are. So where I saw a lot of these used, unfortunately, there was a huge market for them in the 2000s. We pushed a lot of second generation antipsychotics because they were still under patent, and when things are under patent, they're much more profitable. So how patents work is basically like you have a 30-year patent, I believe. Typically it takes there's 4 FDA phases where they do trials to see if it has any promising efficacy, and then animal trials and human trials, and then it goes to market. And they have 30 years that one person has a legal monopoly on the sale of a patented product. After 30 years that expires and generics can come on the market, which typically drives down the price of the patented product. But people argue that the vast majority of medications that are put to trials don't make it, so we need to charge a lot during our patent time to compensate not just for the money and research that was put to get that drug to market, but all the ones that didn't make it to market. Anyway, we pushed second generation antipsychotics real hard in the 2000s. Probably not great. Where I saw them used a lot were in residential treatment facilities with teens. And rather than play a game with basketball with the kids to tire them out, we just labeled them as bad kids and threw drugs at them. It was cruel and not good. Speaking of cruel and not good, stimulants, Adderall, Ritalin, Concerta, cocaine and nicotine. These are all your stimulants. Adderall is probably the most commonly prescribed for adult ADHD. Ritalin and Concerta were more popular in the 90s. Adderall can be short, it can be extended release, it could be more fast acting release. Adderall usually exists anywhere from 10 to 30 milligrams. Where I see a lot of Adderall use is in college kids who buy it to stay up, the entire night before and study, and it helps them focus. The challenge is for me with that, then it becomes a psychological dependency of Adderall helped bail me out because I didn't study properly for my first test. So now I think I can do that again, and or I need to do that again in the future. Adderall is greatly more prescribed to boys than girls. Young boys are far more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD, and if you are young for your class, you are much more likely to be diagnosed as ADHD and prescribed Adderall, just because you're young for your class, not because you really have a clinical disorder. If you think about this, when people were out hunter-gathering as we evolved, it was probably men who were primarily doing that. If women had to take care of children, And you wanted genetic variance in people's norepinephrine levels. You wanted some people who were more focused, and you wanted some people who were more scattered and kind of like squirrel, saber-tooth tiger. You wanted genetic variances in the group so the group would function better as a whole. So like having some people who were wired to be kind of ADHD was useful when we were out hunter-gathering. Now the myth is there that guys were cavemen with like spears killing saber-toothed tigers. If anything, we needed spears probably to defend ourselves against saber-toothed tigers, and we're eating mostly like nuts, roots, fruits, and berries. But again, myths prevail everywhere in the world. The challenge is like we still have people who are wired certain ways, and that used to be much more useful. But now, because it's not so useful in a kind of sit down, shut up, and learn society, we label it as a disorder and throw medication at it, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's just a whole bunch of bad. Not all bad. No, you know, I'm generally like a pro-medication person if it adds value to your life, but I also think we are way over-medicated. So, cocaine, nicotine, you know, again, cocaine releases dopamine and norepinephrine. Cocaine is going to be one of your drugs that is probably more psychologically addictive than physically addictive. There's not a lot of a ton of physical like withdrawal to the extent with cocaine, to the extent that there would be with opiates or other drugs. Nicotine, when we look at deaths of despair, you know, 450,000 people die each year of nicotine. It's insane. When you look at the tobacco plant itself, nicotine exists naturally within tobacco to act as an insect repellent. That's why it's there. But we learned when we smoked tobacco that the nicotine, which is a poison to repel insects, when smoked, releases dopamine. Nicotine's insane. I like, if it were up to me, I would gradually raise the price of cigarettes from $10 a pack to $100 a pack. And the reason I would do that is because cigarettes at one point, I learned, this is 20 years ago, but cost a half cent per cigarette to make. Meaning a pack of cigarettes, which is 20 cigarettes, and it costs 10 cents to make. Now, I'm sure it's more than that now, but not that much more. And if it costs 10 cents to make it, we charge $10 per pack, you're like, wow, you know, that's like hugely profitable for big tobacco, and it is. And we sold, you know, Joe Camel to kids, and then we did vaping, and we used Jenny McCarthy, who is a sex symbol, and we sold that to kids. Even after I thought we learned our lesson from Joe Camel, we still made blues incredibly cool and used sexy axers to promote it. Literally banging my head against the wall. So the challenge is here when we have 450,000 deaths from, you know, smoking related diseases. That costs a crap ton of money. So even if a pack of cigarettes costs 10 cents to make and we sell it for, let's say, you know, $10, part of that goes to big tobacco. Part of that is a sin tax that is revenue for the federal government. And we're like, great, okay, cool. We're making money off of people's vices, but we're not. Because for every dollar we make in kind of a tax off nicotine, we are losing 10 more in the publicly rated health costs associated with treating emphysema, COPD, and the 450,000 alcohol or nicotine-related deaths every year. So again, if it were up to me, I'm a libertarian. I don't care if people smoke, go ahead. But like, I don't want my tax-paying money going for it. So let's charge it what it actually should be to cancel out its cost, which would be about 10 times more than it is now. A pack of cigarettes to cancel out its public-related health costs should cost about $100 a pack, not 10. Vaping, like I said, vaping is, I hate to say it, generally healthier than smoking, probably, because it just has nicotine and not some of the other various tars and other chemicals that exist in like a Marlboro. The challenge is vaping is much easier to hide, appeals to kids, was advertised by Jenny McCarthy, who I said like was a sex symbol. So even though we got rid of Joe Camel because we're like it advertised to teens, we just replaced the entire market with vaping. We didn't really get rid of smoking. We just replaced the market with vaping. Not a huge fan. Your major tranquilizers, I just kind of missed mentioning these. Benzos used to be called minor tranquilizers before they were just more known as benzos. There are still major tranquilizers like phenobarbital and Quaaludes. People don't really do those anymore, but just thought I'd mention them. Getting into the big book and Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson in the 12 steps. The big book is essentially like the Bible for Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And it has numerous chapters, and it talks about, you know, Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson, who were the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. Both were alcoholics. Both realized that by talking with others who were struggling with alcohol abuse, they were able to stay sober. They were like, you know, I'm talking to you, you know, about this struggle, and us talking about these struggles together is helping us all, kind of that weed concept that I strongly support, helping us all, you know, not drink. And so that was around, I think, 1939, the origination of the 12 steps. We admit we're powerless to our addictions, that our lives have become unmanageable. You know, the second and third steps are very kind of God-related. The fourth step, you know, turning our lives and our wills over to a higher power. So, you know, very non-secular there, very much religious overtones with all of this. The fourth step is a personal inventory, where it's like we take a fearless personal inventory and kind of look at ourselves. The fifth step is to make amends, and it's basically like, you know, we apologize for those we've wronged. Steps 8 and 9 I don't remember them off the top of my head. Step 12 is kind of the pay it forward step, which is like, we're going to help others now that we've gone through these steps ourselves. So, you know, the 12 steps have helped millions of Americans achieve recovery. The challenge is, you know, they shy on medications that have been proven to be effective. Medicaid-assisted treatment is super effective, especially in treating, you know, opiates and other things, and even alcohol. It shuns moderation management, which, if we look at addiction on a spectrum, you have use, abuse, and dependency. Use is recreational use. You know, a lot of people recreationally use even things like heroin. Not everybody who uses heroin is addicted to heroin. So recreational use exists where people use drugs and don't really have problems with it. Abuse comes in when you have problems with it. You start missing work, it starts hurting relationships, you have legal issues. And then dependency is defined when people have a tolerance and people would go through withdrawal without that drug. An abstinence approach is probably the best way to treat dependency, and or medicated-assisted treatment. But moderation can typically work for someone in an abuse stage, or, you know, and kind of help them use recreationally again with moderation rules around their use. And in rare cases, sometimes even, you know, you can take someone who's physically dependent and still have them put rules around moderate use. So, you know, for me, the 12 steps are not the only way. And if you are not religious, or you're not ready for complete abstinence, or you don't want to say, hi, my name is Steve and I'm an addict, which is, in my opinion, a negative self-fulfilling prophecy, does more harm than good. There hasn't been many other, you know, treatment modalities that are easily accessible. So Smart Recovery has come out, you know, there are other routes, but they're just not nearly as prominent as 12-step meetings. And what will happen is, you know, people will get in trouble with the law, and then judges will make people go to 12-step meetings. And sometimes, you know, especially with like teenagers, they get in trouble with the law for a little bit of pot. They go to a 12-step meeting, and then they have to say in front of everyone, hi, my name is and I'm an addict. And it just doesn't equate to me, because there are people in that room who have spilt more alcohol than that person has been in trouble for drinking. But then they're supposed to say, I'm an addict with an incurable lifelong disease. Nah, not quite the right fit there. So, you know, 12 steps can be the right fit and has helped millions of people achieve recovery, and I'm incredibly thankful for that. But us coercing people into kind of a one-size-one-approach-fits-all fear-based approach, if you don't do it our way, it's going to lead to jails, death, and institutions, not very good either. So how the body processes alcohol. Your body can process, on average, about 1 drink per hour. If you are heavier set and a guy, you can probably drink a little bit more. If you are not so heavy and female, you can drink a little less. But basically, like, 1 drink is defined as 1 shot, 5 ounces of wine, or 12 ounces of beer. The body typically processes about 1 drink per hour. Just kind of a good rule of thumb. Obviously, there's variance to that, but that's kind of a good rule of thumb. Remember that 20% of people who purchase alcohol purchase 80% of the alcohol. Now, something I'd like to talk about is called the iron law of prohibition. So we think more macro level. in the 1920s, alcohol was illegal, and there were speakeasies, and even though we made it illegal, everybody drank. It didn't stop anybody. It just did it more secretively. At the same time, what we drank changed. So when things are legal, people like Miller Lite. Like, yeah, I'm at a party, I'll take a Miller Lite, thank you. However, one quick little distraction here. I'm gonna pause and do part 4.